ऑफिसर को पब्लिक प्रोजेक्ट्स के लिए 100 करोड़ रुपए मिलते हैं।
ओके।
एक साल बाद पता चलता है कि सिर्फ 50 करोड़ ही यूज हुए हैं
ओह
और बाकी 50 करोड़ का कोई हिसाब ही नहीं है।
ओह वाओ।
कहाँ गया वो पैसा, और जो यूज हुआ क्या वो सही जगह यूज हुआ? दिस इज नॉट जस्ट अ स्टोरी माय फ्रेंड, दिस इज द रियलिटी ऑफ पब्लिक फंड्स एंड इट्स अ मैसिव एथिकल डिलेमा।
सही बात है।
आज हम एग्जैक्टली यही सब अनपैक करने वाले हैं इन मैसिव डिटेल। और इससे पहले कि हम इस डीप एनालिसिस में गोता लगाएं, एक छोटा सा काम कर दो, जल्दी से वो सब्सक्राइब बटन दबा दो, लाइक करो एंड नोटिफिकेशन बेल ऑन कर लो।
हाँ प्लीज।
सीरियसली इट कीप्स अस गोइंग। और कमेंट करके बताओ कि तुम ये लेक्चर कहाँ से सुन रहे हो। आई लव टू सी आवर कम्युनिटी ग्रोइंग।
बिल्कुल। And today, our learning map is absolutely packed. We're going to tackle 5 key questions covering governance, public funds, and work culture.
ओह यस,
ये एक मैराथन सेशन होने वाला है, so get ready.
यू बेट। फर्स्ट हम गुड गवर्नेंस और ई गवर्नेंस के रोल को समझेंगे। फिर we'll dive into the accountability of public funds and explore the reasons and implications of funds being underutilized. ये सबसे क्रिटिकल पार्ट है, I think.
It is. And then we will shift gears to organizational ethics. हम एक ethical work culture के लिए code of ethics की importance देखेंगे.
Right.
And finally, we will discuss the delicate balance between discipline and flexibility in any organization. So get ready, there is a lot to learn.
चलो शुरू करते हैं। First up, let's tackle our first question, which is from the year 2022. Question text. What do you understand by the term good governance? How far have recent initiatives in terms of e-governance, steps taken by the state, helped the beneficiaries? Discuss with suitable examples. Broad micro-theme. Ethics. Theory.
Okay, so good governance, what is this big term?
हाँ, simple terms में।
देखो आसान भाषा में it's a system of administration that is committed to serving citizens effectively and most importantly ethically.
Ethically. That's the key word.
Yes, it's a package deal समझे? इसमें transparent decision making, public accountability और rule of law शामिल हैं. The main ethical challenge here is to ensure that e-governance यानी technology का use really helps people on the ground,
Not just on paper.
not just on paper.
I love that. Let me give you a real life micro story. सोचो, 15 साल पहले किसी को बर्थ सर्टिफिकेट बनवाना होता था।
Oh, I remember those days.
You had to visit a government office multiple times, लंबी लाइंस में लगना, endless paperwork, कभी बाबू नहीं है, कभी सिस्टम डाउन है। It was a total mess.
बिल्कुल frustrating था.
अब तुम अपने फोन से ऑनलाइन अप्लाई कर सकते हो and the certificate is delivered to you. That's a tiny but powerful glimpse of good governance in action through technology.
वही frustration से freedom का सफर ही good governance है. Let's unpack the core idea here. Good governance isn't just about running a country.
नहीं, बिल्कुल नहीं।
It's about how it's run. It's about being effective, yes, but more importantly, it's about being ethical.
Correct.
It's about fairness, justice, and serving the people. The government is a service provider, not a ruler. ये mindset shift ही good governance की शुरुआत है.
Exactly. The core ethical dilemma is this. क्या टेक्नोलॉजी ड्रिवन इनिशिएटिव्स यानी ई-गवर्नेंस सच में हर सिटीजन को बेनिफिट कर रही हैं?
That's a great question. While upholding ethical principles like fairness and equality, technology is a fantastic tool. But is it a tool for everyone? Or is it creating a new divide?
The digital divide.
Yes, the digital divide between the tech-savvy and those who are not. That's the question we need to explore. Good governance के कई key dimensions हैं, like pillars holding up a strong building.
Okay.
अगर एक भी पिलर कमजोर हो, तो पूरी बिल्डिंग गिर सकती है. First and most importantly is accountability.
Accountability यानी जवाबदेही.
Yes, the great philosopher Aristotle ने कहा था, पावर का responsible use होना चाहिए. Accountability का मतलब है
जवाबदेही.
the government is accountable to the people who gave it power. Simple.
बिल्कुल.
Second pillar is transparency. इसका आइडिया आई थिंक गांधी जी के सत्याग्रह से जुड़ा है.
हाउ सो? सत्याग्रह का मतलब था सच के लिए आग्रह। सो गवर्नमेंट्स में ओपननेस होनी चाहिए टू फाइट करप्शन। जब सब कुछ सामने होगा तो गलत काम करना मुश्किल हो जाता है।
सही बात है. It's like having a bright light on in a room. It's much harder for things to hide in the dark.
Yeah.
And the third critical pillar is the rule of law. ये philosopher John Rawls theory of justice का center है.
Rule of law.
It means no one is above the law, whether it's a normal citizen or the prime minister. This provides a fair and predictable framework for everyone. It ensures stability and justice.
Let's take specific examples to make this crystal clear. Transparency के लिए we have the National Data Sharing and Accessibility Policy और NDSAP.
Yes, NDSAP.
ये गवर्नमेंट बॉडीज को proactively डेटा शेयर करने को कहती हैं. So they don't wait for you to ask. They put the information out there for everyone. Cool ना?
Very cool. For accountability, a great example is CGPRMs. That's the Centralized Public Grievance Redress and Monitoring System.
But थोड़ा लंबा नाम है.
हाँ, yes, but it's a simple idea. Citizens online complaints lodge कर सकते हैं और उनका status track कर सकते हैं. No more application किधर है पता नहीं. The system tracks it for you.
And for the rule of law, the e-courts project is a fantastic example.
Absolutely.
Court proceedings को computerized किया जा रहा है for better efficiency and transparency. It helps in clearing the massive backlog of cases and makes justice more accessible.
Now let's move to the e-governance initiatives themselves. ये tools है जिससे good governance को achieve किया जाता है.
Right, the how-to part.
Yes. First, we have digital service delivery. The Umang app is a brilliant example. It's a single platform for hundreds of government services.
एक ही app, काम अनेक. You can access your PF, apply for a passport, and so much more.
Exactly. Second is citizen participation. This is so important for democracy.
बहुत जरूरी.
MyGov.in is a platform जहां citizens policy discussions में participate कर सकते हैं. You can give your ideas on new laws or government programs.
This is real democracy in action. It's not just voting every 5 years, it's participating in governance every day.
बिल्कुल. And third, financial inclusion. The Bheem app and UPI have made digital transactions incredibly easy and secure. This reduces the role of cash.
And where there is less cash, there is less scope for corruption.
Precisely. It empowers people financially and brings them into the formal economy.
Okay, this is super clear. But it brings up some interesting questions. Let's do a quick cross-questioning round.
Sure.
First, for you, how can we ensure that transparency initiatives like NDS app are not just on paper, but actually effective? कैसे check करें?
That's a great question. The key is linking them to social audits, where citizens themselves check the work and data.
Social audits.
Yes. Also, creating user-friendly public dashboards that show real-time metrics, like how many people are accessing the data, is crucial. If people are actually using it, we know it's working.
Perfect. Second question, from an exam point of view. For an answer, is it better to just list the dimensions like accountability and transparency, or explain each with an example like we just did?
Always explain with an example. An example shows a deeper understanding and fetches more marks.
So examples are proof.
Examples are the proof of your concept. A list is just a list. An example brings it to life and makes it memorable for the examiner.
Got it. Third question. What's the main ethical principle behind e-governance?
The primary ethical principle is utilitarianism. It's the principle of maximizing overall well-being by increasing efficiency and accessibility for the maximum number of people.
Greatest good for the greatest number.
Exactly. In simple words, doing the greatest good for the greatest number of people.
Makes sense. Fourth question. What if a citizen is not digitally literate? How does a platform like CPGrams help them? ये तो एक बड़ा problem है.
It is a key challenge and a major ethical concern. To address this, physical help desks or common service centers, CSCs, are set up in villages.
CSCs, right?
These centers have trained people who can assist citizens in filing online grievances. So we bridge the digital divide with a human touch. It creates a very logical and persuasive flow. First, you define the ideal, which is good governance and its pillars.
The what?
Then you show the tool being used to achieve it, which is e-governance, the how.
The how.
And finally, you provide evidence of its impact with examples.
Proof.
The proof. This structure is very convincing.
And my final question on this, to make an answer even better, is it good to give multiple simple examples? Like besides Umang mentioning things we use daily?
Absolutely. Mentioning things like paying your electricity bill online or booking a train ticket via the IRCTC website makes your answer more relatable. These are all e-governance services.
Right.
It shows you can connect the concept to everyday life, which is a sign of a great answer. In conclusion, e-governance has immense potential to promote good governance in India. Lekin, we must address challenges like the digital divide.
It's a big but.
It is. Ensuring that everyone has digital literacy and equal access to technology is crucial. Only then can we maximize the benefits of e-governance and build a truly inclusive and ethically sound system.
Okay. Dost, pause and practice saying this out loud. Good governance is an ethical administration system based on accountability, transparency, and rule of law, which is now being enabled by e-governance tools like UPI and UMang. Chalo practice it.
In short, good governance is about ethical and effective administration, and e-governance is a powerful tool to achieve it. But we must ensure no one is left behind in this digital journey.
तो हमने देखा कि टेक्नोलॉजी से सिस्टम को बेहतर बनाया जा सकता है, लेकिन हर सिस्टम को चलाने के लिए फ्यूल लगता है, और गवर्नेंस का फ्यूल है जनता का पैसा.
Yes, public funds.
अगर पैसा ही गलत इस्तेमाल हो तो अच्छे से अच्छा सिस्टम फेल हो जाएगा. और यहीं से हमारा अगला सवाल शुरू होता है. Next up is a question for the year 2025. Question text. India is an emerging economic power of the world as it has recently secured the status of the fourth largest economy of the world as per IMF projection. However, it has been observed that in some sectors, allocated funds remain either underutilized or misutilized. What specific measures would you recommend for ensuring accountability in this regard to stop leakages and gaining the status of the third largest economy of the world in the near future? Broad micro-theme, ethics, theory.
Accountability is not just a legal obligation, my friend. It's a deep moral imperative.
Moral imperative, I like that.
It reflects ancient wisdom, like Kautilya's principle of responsible stewardship, modern ideas like Max Weber's bureaucratic efficiency, and our own Gandhian philosophy of trusteeship.
Trusteeship.
Yes. The core idea is simple. Public funds are a trust, held by the government for the welfare of its citizens.
Exactly. Let's go back to our story from the start. वो 100 crore wala officer, he was a trustee of that money.
A trustee, yes.
The 50 crore that vanished was a massive breach of trust. On a national scale, this is what misutilization of public funds is. It's as simple and as serious as that.
It's not just a financial loss, it's an ethical failure.
Exactly. The question sets a very big stage. India is on its way to becoming an economic superpower, but it immediately points to a critical internal problem. Fund leakage. Hamara mission yahan par is to recommend specific, actionable measures to stop this leakage. This isn't just about economics. It's about building a nation on an ethical foundation.
Yes, the core idea is that real economic growth must be built on a solid foundation of ethical financial management.
Absolutely.
Accountability ensures that every single rupee is contributing to national progress and not getting lost in the system. To become the third largest economy, we first need to fix our own house. The source provides a fantastic 5-point framework of measures. Let's go through them one by one.
Okay.
The first and perhaps the most important is inner responsibility. Public servants को ये internalize करना होगा कि वो public money के trustees हैं.
An internal compass.
Yes, it's an ethical compass inside them that guides their actions.
It's like a teacher who feels personally accountable for every child's progress in their class.
Perfect analogy.
Ek amazing global best practice for this is from Singapore. Wahan officials are banned from taking even small gifts.
Oh, even small ones.
Yes. This prevents any conflict of interest right at the source. It builds that inner responsibility by removing temptation.
That's very strict.
Second, probity and integrity. Probity means absolute honesty and uprightness.
Complete integrity.
इसके लिए asset disclosures, conflict of interest checks और officers who show moral courage like Ashok Khemka को reward करना जरूरी है. We need to celebrate honesty to create a culture of integrity.
यहाँ global best practice क्या है?
Look at the Scandinavian countries like Denmark and Finland.
The Nordic model.
वहाँ ministers के assets का strict public disclosure होता है. कोई भी गड़बड़ हुई तो it leads to immediate resignation. That's a very strong deterrent.
It creates a culture where integrity is non-negotiable. सही बात है. Third, transparency as a value. This is a powerful tool. इसका मतलब है open access to information through tools like the RTI Act, citizen charters, and social audits.
इससे हर रुपया traceable हो जाता है.
Yes, the MKSS model in Rajasthan, a people's movement, is a great example of this community-driven vigilance.
Globally, the examples are stunning. Estonia's e-governance system is so transparent that citizens can see which official has accessed their personal data.
That's incredible.
And South Korea's open system digitally tracks funds in real time. इससे ghost beneficiaries का scope ही खत्म हो जाता है.
Technology as a solution.
Okay, let's pause here for our cross-questioning. First, inner responsibility sounds great in theory, but how can you actually cultivate it in a large bureaucracy?
You cultivate it through continuous ethical training.
Right from the induction phase.
Yes, by rewarding integrity publicly and by creating a culture where honest feedback is valued, not punished. Most importantly, it has to start from the top. Leadership has to walk the talk.
That makes sense. Second, from an answer writing perspective, how does linking a measure to a global best practice improve an answer's quality?
It shows you're not just giving theoretical points, you're providing evidence-based solutions that have worked in other countries, which makes your answer more practical, credible, and impressive.
It shows a global perspective.
Exactly.
Third question. What is the fundamental difference between transparency and accountability? They sound very similar.
They are related but different. Transparency is about providing information, making things visible.
Okay.
Accountability is about being answerable for your actions based on that information. So you can say transparency is a necessary tool for accountability, but not accountability itself.
Great distinction. Fourth, the source mentions rewarding officers like Ashok Khemka. Why is this specific point so important for building an ethical culture in an answer?
It's crucial because it makes your answer practical and real. It sends a powerful message that the system must protect and value honesty, even when it's inconvenient for powerful people.
It encourages others to show moral courage.
Exactly.
That's right. Fifth question, a bit technical. How can technology like AI and blockchain practically stop leakages? थोड़ा simple terms में बताओ.
Sure. Think of AI as a super smart detective that can analyze spending patterns 24/7 and flag suspicious transactions in real time, saying, hey, this looks odd.
An alert system.
Yes. And blockchain is like a digital notebook where every transaction is recorded permanently and can't be changed by anyone. So money can't just disappear without a trace.
Perfect explanation. And the final question on structure. For this question, why is it so effective to start an answer with an internal value like inner responsibility and then move to external systems?
Because it builds a holistic argument. It shows that accountability isn't just about rules and technology, it starts with the individual's ethical compass.
The human element first.
This internal foundation is then supported by robust external mechanisms. It's a complete 360-degree solution.
Continuing with the measures, the fourth point is answerability and justice. Accountability का मतलब सिर्फ जवाब देना नहीं है.
Right?
It also means grievance redressal and consequences for wrongdoing. Officials must be answerable for both their actions and their inaction. Now, UK's National Audit Office and the Scandinavian Ombudsman systems are fantastic examples here. In these systems, citizens can directly challenge administrative injustice and get a resolution.
It gives power back to the people.
Exactly.
And finally, the fifth measure, performance-linked budgeting and technology. Funds को measurable outcome से जोड़ो. Don't just give money, ask what was achieved with it.
Results-based.
Yes, New Zealand's results-based budgeting model does exactly this. And of course, use modern tools like AI and blockchain for total transparency. In conclusion, true accountability ensures that resources serve the people with probity, transparency, and justice. By mixing these global best practices with India's own deep-rooted ethical traditions, we can certainly curb leakages, strengthen trust, and pave the way for India's rise as a true economic and ethical power.
Chalo, time to rehearse. Pick one measure like transparency as a value and try to explain it in just 15 seconds with its global best practice. Go on, give it a shot. This is great practice.
In short, to stop fund leakage and ensure accountability, we need a powerful cocktail of inner ethics, transparent systems, strict answerability, and smart technology.
We've talked about how to ensure accountability, but let's dig deeper into the problem itself. Why do funds get underutilized or misutilized in the first place?
Yes, the root cause.
Our next question from 2019 explores just that. Let's jump to the question from the year 2019. Question text. Effective utilization of public funds is crucial to meet development goals. Critically examine the reasons for underutilization and misutilization of public funds and their implications. 150 words. Broad microtheme, ethics.
Effective public fund utilization is the absolute backbone of socio-economic development. It aligns perfectly with Gandhi's trusteeship principle, where the state holds resources in trust for the people.
The trust again.
But this trust is broken by two big enemies. Underutilization, पैसा खर्च ही नहीं हुआ, and misutilization, पैसा गलत जगह खर्च हुआ.
I love this analogy. It's like having a full water tanker for a thirsty village.
Okay.
Underutilization is when the tap is jammed and no water comes out. Misutilization is when the pipe is leaking and watering some random field instead of reaching the village.
That's a great way to explain it.
दोनों ही cases में, the village remains thirsty. That's the tragedy. The question asks us to critically examine, which is a key instruction.
A very important keyword.
It means we need to go beyond just listing the reasons. We need to analyze the why behind the problem and the so what, the consequences or implications of this failure.
Exactly. A good introduction should clearly state that proper fund utilization is crucial for public welfare and achieving our national development goals. When it's not done right, it's not just an administrative failure.
It's an ethical failure.
It is. It is a violation of core ethical principles of justice and duty. Let's first look at the reasons for misunderutilization. First, the biggest culprit. Bureaucratic hurdles.
Red tape.
Yes. We're talking about complex procedures and suffocating red tape. Ethically, this violates the duty of the state to serve its people efficiently. It's a failure of duty.
The Ken-Betwa River Linking Project is a classic real-world example of this, जहां environmental clearances or interstate approvals में prolonged delays हुए, blocking the funds from being used for years.
So the intention was good.
But the execution was trapped in files.
The second reason is a lack of planning. Often, there are no proper needs assessments or feasibility studies. Money is allocated based on assumptions, not on ground reality.
This leads to wastage.
Massive wastage.
For example, the midday meal scheme, a wonderful initiative, was criticized in some areas for inadequate nutritional planning.
अच्छी intention थी, but planning weak थी.
Yes, the intention was amazing, to feed children, but weak planning led to suboptimal outcomes. That's a planning failure.
And third, the most obvious and ugly reason is corruption. We're talking about misappropriation and embezzlement. This is a direct violation of the principle of justice, which demands fairness and equity in the distribution of resources.
The 2G spectrum allocation scam is a massive example of this. In this scam, our country's mobile network licenses were allocated improperly, causing a huge loss to the government treasury.
Money that could have built thousands of schools and hospitals.
Exactly. Time for another round of cross-questioning. First, how are bureaucratic hurdles an ethical issue and not just a simple administrative one?
It becomes an ethical issue because these delays deny citizens their fundamental rights. and timely access to development.
Okay.
It is a breach of the duty of the state towards its people. Delaying welfare is denying welfare.
That's a powerful way to put it. Second question for answer writing. How do you choose the best example for a point like lack of planning?
We should choose an example that is well known, relatable, and clearly illustrates the point. The midday meal scheme is perfect because everyone understands its noble goal,
Right.
and which makes the failure in planning very easy to grasp and very impactful.
Smart. Third, the question says critically examine. How does linking these issues to ethical principles of duty and justice fulfill this requirement?
It elevates the answer from a simple list of problems to a deep ethical analysis.
It adds depth.
It shows the examiner that you understand the moral failure behind the administrative failure. It adds intellectual depth to your answer.
Fourth, what is the single biggest implication of the erosion of public trust?
It weakens the very fabric of democracy itself. When people stop believing in their government institutions, they may stop participating, paying taxes, or following laws.
This can lead to a breakdown of social order.
It's that serious.
Wow. Fifth question, how can the structure of this answer, reasons first, then implications, be made even more effective?
A very powerful technique is to create a direct link. For each reason, you can immediately state its primary implication. For example, bureaucratic hurdles, which delay projects, directly lead to hampered development.
Cause and effect.
This cause and effect structure is extremely impactful and easy to follow.
Love that. One last, slightly tricky question. Could underutilization of funds sometimes be a good thing? Socho thoda.
That's a fascinating thought. In a very rare case, yes. For instance, if a project is found to be environmentally destructive after the funds are allocated,
Okay.
then not using them is better than causing irreversible harm. But this is an exception. Generally, it points to poor initial planning. Now let's look at the dark side, the implications. First, hampered development. Progress slows down. The directive principles of state policy in our constitution, which are our development goals, cannot be achieved.
A simple example, delays in disbursing funds for rural electrification projects. The result, गांव तक बिजली नहीं पहुंचती, children can't study at night, and development is stalled.
Exactly. Second, erosion of public trust. This breeds cynicism and distrust in government, which seriously impacts our democratic values. People start to feel that the system is not for them.
The Commonwealth Games scam is a perfect example. It wasn't just about money, it severely eroded public faith in the government's ability to manage large-scale, prestigious projects honestly.
Bilkul. And third, increased inequality. Inefficient fund allocation makes the existing disparities between the rich and poor even worse.
It violates the principle of distributive justice.
Yes, it does.
For instance, underfunding in public health systems disproportionately affects marginalized communities. The rich can go to private hospitals, but the poor depend on a system that is failing them due to lack of funds.
To solve this massive problem, we need a multi-pronged attack. Stronger accountability mechanisms, radical transparency, and streamlined bureaucratic processes.
And citizen participation.
Most importantly, citizen participation through social audits can act as a powerful check, ensuring that public funds serve their real purpose.
Quick practice round. Explain the difference between underutilization and misutilization using that water tanker analogy. Record yourself and see if it's crystal clear. Go on.
In short, public funds are often wasted because of red tape, poor planning, and corruption. And the tragic consequences are slowed development, broken public trust, and increased inequality.
So we see that the people and the systems are at the very heart of these issues.
Absolutely.
This perfectly leads us to our next question. How do you build an ethical work culture within an organization from the ground up? Let's explore.
Here comes our fourth question, also for the year 2025. Question text, it is said that for an ethical work culture, there must be a code of ethics in place in every organization. To ensure a value-based and compliance-based work culture, what suitable measures would you adopt in your workplace? Broad micro-theme, ethics. Theory.
A code of ethics is basically the constitution or the rulebook of principles for an organization's behavior.
The moral compass. Yes, the moral compass. It's like Aristotle's virtue ethics and Gandhi's Satyagraha combined, ensuring integrity and accountability are not just words on a wall, but actions in the hallway.
सोचो अगर क्रिकेट टीम में कोई रूल्स नहीं होते तो क्या होता?
Chaos.
Complete chaos. A code of ethics is exactly that. It sets the rules for fair play in a workplace. It clearly tells everyone what's a sixer and what's a foul.
It creates a level playing field for everyone.
Exactly. The question is clearly two-part. First, why is a code of ethics so important? And second, what specific measures can ensure both a value-based culture and a compliance-based culture?
Yes, we need to tackle both.
We need to tackle both these aspects.
Correct. A good introduction will establish that a code of ethics is the foundation for any organization that wants to be successful in the long run. It guides every decision, big or small.
Bilkul. Let's first quickly discuss the importance of a code of ethics. First, it acts as a moral compass during tough ethical dilemmas.
Right.
Second, it sets clear behavioral standards for everyone, ensuring fairness. Third, it ensures legal compliance with important acts like the RTI Act.
Okay.
Fourth, it helps in trust building. Look at E. Sridharan's work with the Delhi Metro. His ethical leadership built immense public trust. And finally, it provides a clear framework for conflict resolution.
Okay, so we know it's super important. Now for the how part. Let's start with measures for a value-based work culture. This is about building ethics from the inside out, from the heart.
Yes, and number one is always leadership by example. Senior officials must walk the talk. They must live the values.
Walk the talk. Kiran Bedi's transformative reforms in Tihar Jail are a powerful example of this. She led from the front and changed the culture.
Then we need regular training programs on ethics, not boring ones,
Haha, yes, not boring ones.
but engaging workshops incorporating teachings like Vivekananda's on character building and service orientation.
Also, merit-based promotions are critical. We need transparent performance appraisals, plus open communication channels like town hall meetings.
And recognition.
And finally, recognition systems for ethical behavior, like the Prime Minister's Awards for Excellence.
This is the perfect spot for our cross-questioning. First, what's the main difference between a value-based and a compliance-based culture?
A value-based culture is driven by an internal motivation to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. It's about wanting to.
Okay, wanting to.
A compliance-based culture is driven by external rules and the fear of punishment. It's about having to.
Having to.
You absolutely need both for a robust system.
Second question about structure. Why is leadership by example always the first point in such answers? Iski structural importance kya hai?
Because culture flows from the top down. If the leaders aren't ethical, no amount of rules or training manuals will work.
It's the foundation.
It is the foundational pillar of an ethical house. So you must mention it first to show you understand how culture is built.
Makes total sense. Third, how can a simple thing like an open communication channel promote an ethical culture?
It creates psychological safety. It allows employees to voice concerns or ideas without fear of retribution.
So people feel safe to speak up.
Yes, this promotes transparency and participatory governance. It sends a message that every voice matters in building an ethical organization.
Fourth, can a code of ethics ever be too rigid and actually harm an organization?
Yes, absolutely. If it's just a long list of don'ts without explaining the underlying values, it can stifle creativity and innovation.
It can kill new ideas.
Yes, a good code should be a guiding document that empowers ethical decision-making, not just a restrictive rule book that creates fear.
Fifth, when mentioning legal acts like the RTI Act in an answer, how much detail should one go into?
Just mentioning the name of the act is usually enough to show that you're aware of the legal framework. You don't need to explain the entire act.
Just connect it to the point.
Exactly, just connect it to the point you're making. For example, the code ensures compliance with the RTI Act's transparency mandates.
Last question, how does rewarding ethical behavior, for example with an integrity award, create a better impact than just punishing unethical behavior?
Punishment creates a culture of fear and compliance. You do the minimum to avoid getting caught.
Right. Recognition creates a culture of aspiration and pride. It positively reinforces the desired behavior, which is always more sustainable and powerful in the long run.
Now for the second part of the answer, measures for a compliance-based work culture. This is about the systems, the checks and balances, the guardrails on the highway.
Absolutely. Here we need robust monitoring systems, using modern e-governance tools for real-time tracking and accountability.
Then regular audits.
Yes, regular audits are non-negotiable. Internal audits, social audits by citizens, and third-party evaluations.
Crucially, we need strong whistleblower protection. Yes.
We must create safe and anonymous channels for people to report misconduct. The courage shown by honest officers needs to be systematically protected.
And finally,
You need crystal clear documentation protocols to ensure an audit trail and swift disciplinary mechanisms so that there are real consequences for breaking the code. The best approach is to integrate the duty-based approach of rules with our own Indian constitutional values of service and justice. This creates a sustainable ethical framework where value-based leadership and systematic compliance mechanisms work together hand in hand for good governance and public trust.
now pause and think. If you were the boss of an organization, what is the one value-based measure and the one compliance-based measure you would implement on day one? Chalo decide karke bolo. This is a great thought experiment. In short, a truly ethical workplace needs both a strong inner moral compass, which comes from values, and clear external guardrails, which come from compliance.
We've talked about rules and compliance, and one of the oldest tools for compliance is discipline. But is discipline always a good thing?
Can it backfire?
Yes, can it backfire? Our final question for today tackles this fascinating dilemma, and we're on our final question from the year 2017. Question text, discipline generally implies following the order and subordination. However, it may be counterproductive for the organization. Discuss. Broad micro-theme, ethics. Theory?
डिसिप्लिन का मतलब आमतौर पर रूल्स फॉलो करना और हायरार्की को रिस्पेक्ट करना होता है. इट्स एसेंशियल फॉर ऑर्डर, प्रिडिक्टेबिलिटी एंड एफिशिएंसी इन एनी लार्ज ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, स्पेशली इन गवर्नमेंट.
Sure.
But like anything in life, too much of it can be harmful. It can kill creativity, innovation, and individual initiative.
I have a great analogy for this.
Wow.
Imagine a super strict school principal.
Okay.
The school में silence and order तो होगा, for sure. But will students ever ask creative out-of-the-box questions or challenge old ideas?
Probably not.
शायद नहीं. They will be too scared to think differently. That's the dilemma. The key word in this question is discuss.
Okay.
This is a clear signal that we need to present both sides of the coin.
The pros and the cons.
Yes. We need to argue for discipline and then argue against rigid discipline.
Exactly. The introduction should set up this very debate. Discipline is necessary for accountability and order, but rigid, unthinking discipline can be counterproductive. The ultimate goal for any great organization is to find an ethical balance between the two. Let's start with the positive side. How discipline helps in fostering a culture of accountability.
Okay, the good side first.
Discipline sets clear expectations for everyone. Ethically, this aligns with a duty-based approach, which emphasizes the importance of universal rules that apply to everyone equally.
For example, this leads to enhanced productivity. In hospitals like AIIMS, a disciplined adherence to standard operating procedures, SOPs, has dramatically improved patient care and safety.
There is no room for error, and discipline ensures that.
Exactly.
It also promotes responsibility. Discipline cultivates a sense of responsibility. The success of the Swachh Bharat Abhiyan can be partially attributed to the instilled sense of civic responsibility and discipline towards cleanliness.
And it builds trust and respect. जब rules are consistently and fairly enforced, तो system में trust बढ़ता है.
Yes.
The Indian judiciary, with its strict adherence to due process and rules, is an example of how discipline builds public trust in an institution over time.
Okay, let's jump into our final cross-questioning session. First, how can an organization know when its discipline has become counterproductive? What are the warning signs?
The warning signs are usually clear. They include high employee turnover, a noticeable lack of new ideas or innovation, a culture of fear where people are afraid to speak up.
And people just doing the minimum, and employees who are doing only the bare minimum required to not get into trouble.
Yes.
Good points. Second, in an answer structure, why is it generally better to present the pro-discipline arguments first?
Because it establishes the conventional wisdom first, that discipline is a good and necessary thing. Then you introduce the counter-argument, which makes your discussion appear more nuanced, balanced, and thoughtful.
You're showing both sides logically.
Exactly.
The source links discipline to a duty-based approach and flexibility to individual liberty. Why is this use of ethical theories so effective in an answer?
It shows you're not just giving a personal opinion. You're grounding your arguments in established, respected ethical theories. This adds immense intellectual weight, credibility, and depth to your analysis.
It shows you've studied properly.
Exactly. Can you give a simple, everyday example of the balance between discipline and flexibility?
Of course. Think of a healthy diet. You need the discipline to eat nutritious food and avoid junk, the rules.
Okay.
But you also need the flexibility to enjoy a treat occasionally, autonomy and freedom to make the diet sustainable in the long run.
That's a perfect analogy. Fifth, how can a leader enforce discipline without creating a culture of fear?
By explaining the why behind the rules so people understand the purpose. By applying the rules fairly to everyone, including themselves.
Leading by example again.
Yes. And most importantly, by focusing on learning from mistakes rather than just punishing them. The goal is improvement, not fear.
Last question. What's the main takeaway of linking the conclusion to the Indian ethos of dharma?
It contextualizes the answer beautifully for an Indian setting. The concept of dharma wonderfully captures this dual aspect of having a duty, which requires discipline, and also allowing for individual growth and righteousness, which requires flexibility.
So it's a perfect concluding thought.
It is. Now for the other side of the coin. Balancing discipline with flexibility. Rigid rules can suffocate creativity. This relates to the principle of individual liberty, which says that autonomy and self-expression are crucial for human progress.
Flexibility is absolutely crucial for encouraging innovation. Google's world-famous 20% time policy is the best example.
Ah, yes.
Employees were allowed to spend 20% of their time on personal projects, and world-changing innovations like Gmail and Google News were born from this freedom.
It also promotes employee engagement. जब employees को autonomy और trust मिलता है, वो ज़्यादा motivated और engaged feel करते हैं. HCL Technologies' employee-first culture, which emphasizes empowerment, is a great case study of this principle in action.
And it helps in adapting to change. In a fast-changing world, flexibility is survival. During the COVID-19 pandemic, flexible organizations like Infosys were able to successfully and quickly shift to a remote work model because their culture was adaptable, not rigid.
In conclusion, while discipline is crucial for organizational effectiveness, it must be balanced with flexibility to foster a positive, innovative, and productive work environment.
The balance is key.
Yes, This balanced approach, promoting both accountability and autonomy, is essential for long-term success and aligns perfectly with the Indian ethos of Dharma, which emphasizes both our duty and our individual growth.
Okay, your final practice for today? Argue for 30 seconds why too much flexibility can be bad for an organization. Chalo, make your case. Think about the dangers of chaos and lack of accountability. Rehearse it now.
In short, the best organizations are neither military camps with absolute discipline nor chaotic playgrounds with no rules. They find that perfect, dynamic sweet spot between disciplined rules and creative freedom.
And that's a wrap on our super detailed analysis today. What a journey, right? हमने 5 critical questions को explore किया from top to bottom.
Let's do a quick final recap. The broad micro-theme we covered was ethics, FAIRY, focusing on quality of service delivery, utilization of public funds, and work culture.
Yes.
First, we saw that good governance is about ethical and accountable administration, with e-governance as a key enabler to make it happen.
Right.
Second, we learned that ensuring accountability for public funds requires a powerful mix of inner responsibility, radical transparency, and robust technological systems.
The cocktail, as you called it.
Yes. Third, we examined why funds are misutilized or underutilized due to red tape, poor planning, and corruption, and how this erodes public trust and hampers national development. Fourth, we understood that a strong ethical work culture needs both a value-based foundation to inspire people and a compliance-based framework to guide them.
Inspire and guide.
Both.
Both.
And finally, we discussed the delicate balance between discipline and flexibility, realizing that the best path lies in combining accountability with autonomy, rules with freedom.
Phew, that was a lot, but hopefully everything is crystal clear now. Remember, these concepts are not just for exams.
No, not at all.
Yes, please do.
Your engagement truly motivates us to bring more such content. Until next time, keep learning and more importantly, keep questioning.